Hi, I'm Dave Sahigian with the GenXFiles.com. If you want to find out more about my blog postings, look there. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the turnings of generations. This was actually brought on by a post put together by Jessie X over at HometownColumbia.com. I highly recommend you go ahead and take a look at her blog posting on this. It's called The Terrible Octomom, and I'll refer back to it a couple times. I'll put a link into it in the blog post as well. What I'm going to be talking about is the cycle of generations, and the cycle of generations described by William Strauss and Neil Howe in their book The Fourth Turning, as well as their book The Generations, Generations in 1991, describes this cycle of generations or turnings that happen that are very similar to the seasons of the year, and that's what Jessie X described in her post, is the turning of each season from one to the next. So starting with the spring as the first, the initial season, and then moving on to summer, then fall, and then finally winter. And the names for these, so these seasons happen in the year, but these also happen in these 20 or so year periods, and they call this the spring the high. And the last American high was 1964 to 1946 to 1964. So that was the last American high, and this was the 40s and 50s when everything was good and it looked like the future could only get brighter. We'd won the World War II, and the United States was a powerful nation, and during that period you had the baby boomers being born. They were actually born from 43 to 1960, but they were mainly during this high period, and this is a period where people, it's springtime. People are mating and producing babies, and that's why you have this huge baby boom. They're thinking the future looks bright. It's only going to get better. We, have babies, have a great time, and that's what the GI generation was doing, having these baby boomers during this period. That ended, the generation of the baby boom ended up in 1960. The summer started in 1964 to 1984, and that's why demographers say that the baby boom ended in 1964. The attitude actually shifted towards children earlier than that, 1961, when this was a period more like the summer, when it was a time when it's like the lazy hot days of summer. Times are good, and you can enjoy the outdoors and enjoy wonderful times with your friends. And it's not so much a time when you want to focus on children, and you want to be able to have time for yourself. And the young adult baby boomers who are coming of age during this period their older generation that was having these Gen X children was more concerned with their own needs. And as Jessie X explains in her post, I think really well, it was a time when having babies, it was more about what was in it for me, so we didn't worry about that so much, and there was a passionate fight for, as she says, abortion rights, access to birth control, and basically the right to not have children, and that's what Gen X grew up in. The next season is the fall, and this is the harvest, right, the time of plenty. This is 1985 to 2005, and this is also called the unraveling. Oh, by the way, this is called the awakening, this period of summer. So the unraveling is this fall period, and in this unraveling period, you have, this is when the millennials started being born. You had those, the baby on board stickers being put in people's windows. This is the time of harvest when you're gathering all that was worked for in the spring and what grew up in the summer. Now you have the harvest and this unraveling in the fall. It is a time of plenty, but it's also a time when something, things are kind of falling apart and beginning the dying off process. And it's a time when children are more cherished, where you're gathering the best that you could possibly create, the baby boomers' children, the millennials, and those children are really wanted children, and they're cherished, and they're taken care of, and there's, the fertility clinics and all of that Jessie X points out are really becoming popular at this time. And so that the final period that occurs is the winter, which is also known as the crisis. And that's the period that we're in right now, say 2005 or so, we're not sure exact dates, to 2020. or 2025. And that period will last for a little while. The generation coming of age in this, or being born in this, is being called the Homelander generation. I won't even put years on this. It is 2000 something through 2020 something. I'm not sure exact years. And having children in a winter is, arguably not as good an idea. It's, you've already had your chance at the harvest, and if you had kids, great. If not, maybe it's time to have fewer, and we'll probably see the birth rates going down. But in addition, it's also a time where people question whether you should be having lots of children. And that was the point of Jesse X's post, was about the woman who had 8 children, and including sextuplets, and what was she doing having this many children? It's irresponsible. Well, if some period before, maybe during this fall period, the unraveling, if someone had done that, it wouldn't have really been questioned. But now we're calling her irresponsible. And maybe during the next high, we'll say, well, that's just fine. You can have as many kids as you want. So I think it was very astute. Just one part of this cycle, this seasonal cycle, the high to the awakening to unraveling to crisis. What is the attitude towards having children during this? And of course, what does this form in the attitude of those children? The baby boomers born as wanted and, during a prolific time, unwanted Gen X children, survivalist, pragmatic, millennials who are wanted and very focused on and taken care of, and then the homeland generation, this very protected and insular generation that will likely be smaller than the other ones. So this cycle is an interesting cycle that is described more fully in the book by William Strauss and Neil Howe, and I would definitely suggest you check that out. And if you have more questions about any of this research, you can also look at my blog, thegenxfiles.com, and don't forget to check out Jesse X at hometowncolumbia.com.